It's 5 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. Time for the world today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up on the program. Rescue team searching for survivors on the French island of Mayotte after tropical cyclone Chido hit over the weekend. 12 people dead from carbon monoxide poisoning at Georgia ski resort. Plus, South Korean court begins President Yoon's impeachment trial process over his botched martial law declaration. Let's begin the world today. We delve right into Cyclone Chido and the destruction it has left behind in the French island territory of Mayotte in the Indian Ocean over the weekend. The number of casualties is still being collated, but it's been established that hundreds of people are already feared dead. Authorities are warning the death toll could reach close to 1,000 or even several thousand. It's been described as the worst cyclone to hit the island in 90 years, with waves up to 8 meters high. Residents of the island are still reeling from the impact of the cyclone. There's been widespread damage to infrastructure. Power lines are down, roads have become impassable, severely hindering emergency and rescue operations. About 48 to 50% of people on the island were not born there. Many of them came to the island through boat crossings from the Comoros, the neighboring archipelagos, and from Madagascar. Others have come from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Somalia. They came on the promise of entering Europe, but ended up in Mayotte instead. In the meantime, people are starting to die of hunger and thirst, according to authorities and according to those on the ground, because of damage done to infrastructure. Rescuers are currently searching for survivors and struggling to restore phone lines and water supplies. Chido passed beyond Mayotte and is continuing its trajectory after making landfall in Mozambique. The French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau has been on the island today, seeing the extent of the damage. Is also sought from authorities on the ground how bad things really are. The hospital is set to be running again, according to those on the ground. There's some water and electricity there that's been restored, but some other services are still lacking. Politicians in France are stressing their resolve and solidarity, but because Mayotte is 7,000 kilometers from the French mainland, logistics are a massive problem. Another French island on the other side of Madagascar, Réunion, is being used as a staging post. Some 1,600 police officers and gendarmes are now on the ground, clearing debris and assisting the population. Around 800 personnel from emergency services, Sécurité Civile, are also being sent to support recovery efforts. Well, let's bring in the VOA's Lisa Bryant. She's in Paris. Lisa, great to see you. Let's talk about the area itself, Mayotte. It's not very often we hear about Mayotte in the news. It's also not very often that we have heard anyone talking about this place. Tell us about the island itself and, of what significance it is to France.
Well, it's a small archipelago, of 2 islands, in fact, and it's the poorest place in the European Union, and obviously the poorest part of France. It's one of France's overseas territories. It got its independence in the 1970s, or it voted to stay with France, in the 1970s. It's got a high, as you noted, a very high population of migrants. A lot of the jobs, it's got a high civil servant population, but, it doesn't have, a huge industry to tap into. There are, a high population of young people, extremely high unemployment. It's an island where there are a lot of sort of makeshift shelters made of wood and corrugated metal. So it's a very poor island, and so it's the kind of place that when something like a cyclone, a major storm hits, it's going to be devastating because infrastructure isn't there, and so that's what happened with, as you pointed out, the worst, this kind of storm in 90 years. So it's been all over the French news. The impact is incredible, and that's essentially those are the effects of what at least the residents are saying. Quite a bit of neglect by the French government. French authorities would probably say otherwise.
Yeah, they would say otherwise because a lot of them are talking about solidarity with Mayotte at this time. And I'm wondering how that has been translated to the support that the people are receiving on the ground.
Well, right now, there are some really complicated logistics here because Mayotte is something like 7,000 kilometers away from the French mainland. So, as you were noting, the France had prepositioned, some military. They're sending in military and firemen to help with the rescue and removing debris, etc. And I think more than 1,000 are already there, or maybe 1,500 right now. Bruno Retailleau, who's the acting interior minister, is on the ground. He was going to give like a briefing just about this time with reporters to give the latest. The French are bringing in this material, but the needs are tremendous. Again, there could be thousands dead. It sounds like it might be hard to actually find a final number of deaths when this happens because it's a Muslim community and people bury their dead very swiftly in the Islamic religion. But the needs are amazing, just huge. And having these rotations in by ship or by air of personnel bringing in material, bringing equipment, is just apparently not enough for the needs, which are soaring.
And I was reading up on the island itself, and I've even mentioned that, in the story I read just before coming to you, the island itself is made up of not French citizens, but people who are coming from other places, the archipelagos, Madagascar, some certain countries in Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Is this sort of like a holding area for those who don't make the cut with immigration in France?
I don't think so, but I don't know enough about, the immigration and the processing. What is clear is that, a huge amount of the population is a large percentage are immigrants from different parts of Somalia, as you said, et cetera, Comoros. That adds to some of the issues in the sense that it probably adds to the poverty and high unemployment because French citizens on this island, there are about 320,000 people living on the island in general. They would get some of the French benefits, unemployment or healthcare, etc. But when you're having immigrants coming in, I'm just making this as a guess, they would likely not have access unless they're refugee status, possibly the Somalis, or they've gotten some sort of residency status. So again, that might account for some of the poverty on the island with this large immigrant population that would not necessarily access some of the French benefits in healthcare, et cetera, unemployment compensation and so forth.
Yes, and one of the concerns of residents in Mayotte is what happens after, and I think that's quite a legitimate concern because the French government has to decide what exactly to do about this place. They said, with the devastation that has already happened and the fact that the place right now is almost like a debris of, just all over the place. What could possibly happen to them? Has the French government mentioned anything about the future of Mayotte and the people living there?
I think right now, the government's, primary task and real focus right now is the immediate aftermath, immediate, responding to the needs and rescue operations. Apparently, there's some areas of the islands, the two islands that are just completely inaccessible. I think that there are some issues that they're beyond the needs, which are huge, like water. People are saying they don't have enough water, they don't have enough food. And then the problem of ferrying this stuff in, because the closest Réunion is like 1,400 kilometers away from Mayotte. So that's the closest, point that they are coming in. So all this takes time. It's not like you're on a mainland where you have some other options. I think there are going to be a few fallouts here. First, there was a plan a few years ago, I think in 2018, for developing Mayotte. And there was one study, at least, apparently according to what I've been reading in, on the fact that there wasn't that much follow through to find out what had happened with the money. I think that there's probably going to be quite some focus on what to do in terms of developing Mayotte, redeveloping, giving people jobs, giving industry. But that's going to come after the immediate sort of emergency response. The other thing that I know that the French authorities are thinking about, and it's already been in the news, is the attention and the immediate high-level attention to this. I think there's, the example of Spain right next door of Valencia, where Spanish authorities were highly criticized for coming in late and not enough. I know I was listening to television commentaries talking about that, and should they have a higher level people coming in, like the new prime minister, to visit Mayotte? And practically speaking, it wouldn't do any good. In fact, it would be a negative, because the personnel in charge of the high level security really needs to be off helping people. But there's this image issue that I think the government is thinking about. And the new Prime Minister, François Bayrou, was already criticized today because he's gone off to his southwestern town, where he's also a mayor, to have some kind of mayor conference, just as the Mayotte issue is like high on the minds and high on the news agenda. So these kinds of image issues, and then obviously the short-term immediate assistance, these are the issues that are sort of playing out now. But I think the longer-term issues, as you are discussing, is what's going to happen to Mayotte. What about the development? Probably what about the immigrants too? All these kinds of longer-term questions, I'm sure, are going to be, in the weeks and months to come, high up on the agenda.
Yes, and we see, those rescue workers just trying with very little equipment available to them, trying to clear some of the pathways, I guess, for a more sophisticated equipment to come in and do a lot more work. That's going to take some time, obviously. We understand there are also humanitarian organizations on the ground working with the government. Do you know of these organizations and how exactly they're helping?
I don't know too much about that. I mean, I was hearing a little bit on the radio, and I understand that some of them, have a hard time, in terms of communications, but that's a problem that is apparently across the island, where people don't have access. The phones are down, the electricity is down, etc. From what I've read in general, there are 8 organizations on the ground that usually work hand in hand with governments when they do rescue efforts and cleanups, etc. The military can't do it all. And I would expect that there'll be more and more coming into the island as it becomes more accessible, because right now the airport is very badly damaged, and except for military flights, that's the only thing coming in. So my sense is that the NGOs, the non-governmental and the 8 groups, they'll probably be stepping up their efforts, but probably for now they're operating just like the military, and I'm sure quite worse, in a very, very difficult operational environment.
Lisa, thanks again for speaking with us on this. So we'll continue to monitor the situation in Mayotte. I know you have your eyes and ears close to the ground.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, speaking of those humanitarian organizations, UNICEF says it's dealing with both short-term and long-term impacts, citing loss of life and damage to crucial infrastructure as an immediate priority. UNICEF worker Guy Taylor is in Pemba, the capital of Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province. He says some of the longer-term impacts of the cyclone could include children being cut off from learning and the spread of waterborne disease due to the inability to access healthcare.
I'm in Pemba, the capital of northern Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province, where Cyclone Chido has made landfall this morning as an intense tropical cyclone, bringing with it very heavy winds and rain. UNICEF is concerned about the immediate impacts of this cyclone, the loss of life, the damage to schools, to people's homes, to healthcare facilities. We're also worried about the longer-term impacts, children potentially being cut off from learning for weeks on end, people unable to get access to healthcare, and the potential spread of waterborne diseases like cholera and malaria. UNICEF is here on the ground working closely with our partners and in support of government to respond to the immediate needs of those impacted by the cyclone. But with a cyclone of this magnitude, additional support is urgently needed.
We're still in France. Dominique Pellico, the Frenchman who's admitted to drugging his former wife and inviting dozens of men recruited online to rape her, has asked for forgiveness from Giselle and her family. He is quoted as saying in a final statement following the trial, "I would like to start by hailing the courage of my ex-wife. I regret what I did, making my family suffer. I ask them for forgiveness. Accept my apologies." 72-year-old Giselle herself has become a feminist champion, having taken a stand against the 50 men accused of raping and sexually abusing her over a nearly 10-year period. Sitting in the glass defendant's box, Dominique reaffirmed that he had told the whole truth since the beginning of the trial on September 2nd in the southern French city of Avignon. He thanked the court for allowing him to remain seated on a special chair because of his fragile state of health, which could have been interpreted as nonchalance, but which was not. He also said he loved his family. Police in Georgia say 12 people have died from carbon monoxide poisoning at a ski resort in Georgia. The bodies of 11 foreigners and one Georgia national were found in the sleeping area above a restaurant in Gudari, the largest and highest ski resort in the former Soviet state. Police said preliminary tests do not indicate any trace of violence on the bodies, and it appeared to be an accident. They also say an oil power generator had been turned on after the building lost electricity on Friday. The bodies were discovered on Saturday on the second floor of a building housing an Indian restaurant. Authorities have opened an investigation into the incident, and the identities of the victims have not yet been released. Our Australian government says 7 tourists, including 4 Australians, have been hospitalized in a suspected case of alcohol poisoning at a resort in Fiji. Australia Treasurer Jim Chalmers said at a press conference that consular officials are helping those impacted along with their families, while Fiji's police are leading an investigation into the poisoning. The Australian government has updated its travel advice for Fiji to flag dangers of drink spiking and warned Australians more generally about the risk of alcohol poisoning when travelling.
Out of Fiji with 4 Australians hospitalised over the weekend. We are thinking of the friends and family of the people who are affected. This is no doubt a very distressing time for them. DFAT officials are in contact with those affected Australians and they're providing consular assistance. I wanted to thank and acknowledge the very fine people of DFAT for the effort that goes in situations like this. Fiji police are investigating to determine the cause of the illnesses, and we'll try and keep people updated as that investigation continues. DFAT's updated its travel advice for Fiji with some extra information. Beyond that, people who are affected by this are entitled to their privacy, so we won't say more about their particular situation until or unless it's okay with them. More broadly, obviously, if Australians are travelling, be very alert to the potential risks, in this case around drink spiking and alcohol poisoning. Don't leave your drinks unattended. Pay attention when your drinks are being mixed and get urgent medical help if you suspect that something is wrong.
Fijian locals, however, say their country is still safe, even after those 7 tourists, including the 4 Australians, were hospitalized in a suspected case of alcohol poisoning. Locals in Fiji say what happened was shocking, but they're confident authorities are looking into what happened.
What has happened over the day is very shocking, and I know that relevant authorities are looking into what's happening, and I hope the guests get well. And just from this incident and what has occurred, I think Fiji is still safe.
We usually get guests from Warwick, and we've heard about the alcohol poisoning in Warwick Resort, which is not usually what we hear about, especially on the Coral Coast here. Sending our love, and hopefully they get well soon, very soon, and the recovery is very fast.
We're off on a break now on The World Today. Still ahead. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a Tel Aviv court, the second week of his testimony in his long-running corruption trial. Stay with us for details. Welcome back. South Korea's Constitutional Court has begun trial proceedings for the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol, who was suspended for declaring martial law and plunging his country into political turmoil. MPs voted to impeach Yoon last Saturday after his actions sparked widespread protests, calling for him to step down. The court now has 6 months to decide whether to remove Yoon or reinstate him. Yoon's ruling People Power Party has been grappling with the fallout ever since, with its leader announcing his resignation today. While public hearings for Yoon's impeachment trial could take months, the court is under pressure to decide quickly and bring an end to political uncertainty. Protesters have vowed to keep up their calls for Yoon's removal during the court proceedings. In the previous 2 instances, a South Korean president faced impeachment. The court reversed one decision and upheld the other. Japan, however, says it's paying close attention to political developments in South Korea after President Yoon was impeached over the weekend. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi, at a regular news conference earlier today, said, under the current strategic environment, the importance of Japan-South Korea relations remains unchanged. We will continue to maintain close communication with the South Korean side. Yoon was impeached and suspended from his duties on Saturday over a martial law attempt. South Korea's acting president Han Duck-soo moved on Sunday to reassure the country's allies and calm financial markets. Han also spoke with U.S. President Joe Biden by phone, according to the White House. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in court today in Tel Aviv, the start of the second week of his testimony in his long-running corruption trial. As Netanyahu entered the courtroom, located in the court building's underground second floor for security reasons, his lawyer approached him and whispered into his ear for a minute before media were asked to leave the room. Netanyahu then took the witness stand for the first time last week, saying he was being hounded for his hawkish security policies. The 75-year-old is Israel's first sitting prime minister to be charged with a crime. He's testifying at the same time that Israel is engaged in a war in Gaza and facing possible new threats posed by regional turmoil, including Syria. Earlier this month, judges ruled that Netanyahu, indicted in 2019, must testify 3 times a week, forcing the longtime Israeli leader to juggle between the courtroom and the war room at Israel's defense ministry, just minutes away from the courthouse. Netanyahu was indicted in 3 cases involving gifts from millionaire friends and for allegedly seeking regulatory favors for media tycoons in return for favorable news coverage. He denies any wrongdoing and has pleaded not guilty. In a related development, the Israeli government has approved a plan to encourage the expansion of settlements in the occupied Golan Heights. According to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a move is necessary because a new front has opened up on Israel's border with Syria following the fall of the Assad regime to an Islamist-led rebel alliance. Netanyahu says he wants to double the population of the Golan Heights, which Israel seized during the 1967 Six-Day War and is considered illegally occupied under international law. Well, it comes as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Sunday said the U.S. is in contact with the rebels in control of Syria.
Top diplomats from the United States, Turkey, the European Union, and Arab states met in Jordan on Saturday for talks on Syria as regional and global powers scramble for influence over whatever government replaces ousted President Bashar al-Assad. The outgoing Biden administration in the United States has begun engaging with the victorious rebel group, the HTS, which led the assault that ended Assad's rule. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who was at the meeting in Jordan, spoke of the Washington's interaction with the group.
We've been in contact with HTS and with other parties. We have impressed upon everyone we've been in contact with the importance of helping find Austin Tice and bringing him home. And we've also shared the principles that I just laid out for our ongoing support, principles, again, that have now been adopted by countries throughout the region and well beyond.
EU foreign policy chief said the bloc is ready to do more for Syria.
Syria faces a hopeful but uncertain future, and that's why we all agreed on the principles that the new leadership of Syria should also follow. That is very important to all of us.
Back in Syria, religious leaders have been leading prayers and rallies where they have called for national unity under the country's new government. Even Syrian Christians pray about the country's uncertain future. On Sunday, a number of Syrian students toppled a statue of late Syrian President Hafez al-Assad in Damascus University, cheering and riding on top of it, indicating the image of the founding father of the dynasty is no longer respected. In the meantime, Hezbollah head Naim Qassem says the Lebanese armed group has lost its supply route through Syria. Israel, on the other hand, continues operating in the UN-monitored buffer zone between Syria and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Israel Defense Minister Israel Katz said on Sunday the threat to Israel from Syria remains despite the moderate tone of rebel leaders who ousted President Bashar al-Assad a week ago.
And a day after she commented on the EU's willingness to help the Syrian people rebuild their country, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said she had instructed the bloc's top diplomat for Syria to go to Damascus and make contact with the country's new government. Speaking to reporters on arrival at a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels, Kallas said the diplomat would go to the Syrian capital today.
I've also tasked European top diplomat in Syria to go to Damascus to make the contacts with the new government and people there. So we will also discuss today in the Foreign Affairs Council how we engage with the new leadership of Syria and on what level we engage with the new leadership. And of course, what more steps are we willing to take if we see that Syria goes to the right direction? Well, first we have to discuss on what level we are engaging with the Syrian new leadership, and then what kind of steps are we willing to take in order to have relations with them. So for us, it's not only the words, but we want to see the deeds going to the right direction. So not only what they are saying, but also what they are doing. I think the coming weeks and months will show whether it goes to the right direction, and I think then we are also open to discuss next steps. Syria faces optimistic, positive, but rather uncertain future, and we have to make sure that this goes to the right direction.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused the West of pushing Russia to its red lines, situations it has publicly made clear it will not tolerate, and said Moscow has been forced to respond. President Putin was speaking at a meeting of defense officials, saying that Russia was watching the U.S. development and potential deployment of short and medium-range missiles with concern. He said Russia would lift all of its own voluntary restrictions on the deployment of its own missiles if the U.S. went ahead and deployed such missiles. President Putin, who said Russian forces in Ukraine have taken control of 189 settlements so far this year, said Russia's nuclear weapons are there for deterrence. Speaking of the U.S., Presidents Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have reflected on their administration's achievements and expressed gratitude for their party's support at the Democratic National Committee's holiday reception. President Biden emphasized the progress made by his administration, stating that they left the country in better shape than before. The Vice President Harris highlighted the unity and dedication of their supporters. Both Biden and Harris were accompanied by their respective spouses, First Lady Jill Biden and Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff.
One thing I've always believed about public service, and especially about the presidency, is the importance of asking yourself, have we left the country better shape than we found it? Today, I can say with every fiber of my being, with all my heart, the answer to that question is a resounding yes. Yes. Because of all of you assembled here, just 2 weeks before being sworn in, we just witnessed something we thought would never happen in America. A violent insurrection encouraged by the man sitting in the White House on January 6th. And so much more. We've come a long way since then. We passed historic legislation. Laws that are literally building the strongest economy in the world.
With your help, we brought together people from every walk of life and every background, all united by a deep love of country. All motivated by enthusiasm and joy in our fight for America's future. And as a result of your leadership and your support, the National Finance Committee held more than 700 events across the country and raised nearly $700 million.
Our party chooses leaders who have integrity, like Joe and Kamala. People who lead with compassion and decency. People who fight so that everyone in our country gets a fair shot.
And one of my proudest achievements in this role was the creation of the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, and then seeing it through to its implementation. Your support was critical to me being able to do this impactful work and get out on the campaign trail and to fight for a better and more decent America.
Over in the UK, the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, is facing calls to resign over his handling of a sexual abuse case days before he takes temporary charge of the Church of England. According to a BBC investigation, as Bishop of Chelmsford, Mr. Cottrell let priest David Tudor remain in post in the diocese despite knowing he had been barred by the church from being alone with children and had paid compensation to a sexual abuse victim. Tudor was only banned from ministry 2 months ago after he admitted to historical sex abuse allegations relating to 2 girls. Since this article was first published, Mr. Cottrell has responded by saying he is deeply sorry that action could not be taken earlier, but that was a situation that he inherited. However, the Bishop of Newcastle, the Right Reverend Helen Ann Hartley, said Mr. Cottrell could have done more and should resign as Archbishop. The Economic Community of West Africa Commission has approved the withdrawal of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger from the community beginning from January 29, 2025. The group, however, gives the 3 countries 6 months to rejoin if they want, to rejoin the ECOWAS. ECOWAS announced its approval of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger's exit at the 66th Ordinary Session of the Authority of Heads of State and Government, chaired by Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu at the banquet hall of the State House, Abuja. Our correspondent, Emperor Simon, has more.
The 66th Ordinary Session of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government begins with a group photograph of the leaders of member states led by its chair, President Bola Tinubu, upon their arrival. Shortly after, they go into the hall for the meeting. All member states are present except, of course, the junta-led heads of government of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, who are conspicuously absent. In his statement, President of the ECOWAS Commission, Omar Touray, commends the leadership of President Tinubu in the bloc and for ensuring Nigeria keeps up to its financial obligation to ECOWAS.
Nigeria paid 85 billion naira and 54 million US dollars, representing 100% of the 2023 levy and the levy of 2024 up to July 2024.
President Nana Akufo-Addo is making his last appearance at the meeting as the 13th president of Ghana, following the recently held elections in Ghana, which produced a new president in the waiting. His party's gesture in conceding defeat to the opposition is commended by President Tinubu, who enjoins other member states to take a cue.
Your Excellency, President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, thank you for being who you are. A sincerely committed Democrat who has been a shining example. I therefore invite all of us to give him a standing ovation and more applause.
President Tinubu then calls for more cooperation among ECOWAS members.
As leaders, we are fully aware that security is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Equally, enhancing the living standard of our people is not an aspiration, but an obligation.
After the speeches, members of the media are excused as the meeting goes into a closed-door session for the consideration of the report by the ECOWAS mediation mission led by President Bassirou Diomaye Faye of Senegal and Faure Gnassingbé of Togo, among other reports. Hours later, the meeting opens with the President of the ECOWAS Commission presenting the communiqué, which highlights some of the major decisions taken regarding Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger's membership of ECOWAS.
Three countries will officially cease to be members of ECOWAS from 29 January 2025. The authority decides to set the period from 29 January 2025 to 29 July 2025 as a transitional period and to keep ECOWAS doors open to the three countries during the transition period.
The meeting comes to a close with the final remarks by the chair.
I call on all member states to redouble their efforts in ensuring that decision reached here translates into tangible benefits for our citizens.
For more clarifications, the President of the ECOWAS Commission briefs journalists afterwards on the status of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger.
The 29th of January 2025 is the official date, but then the effective date of withdrawal is 29th of July 2025.
ECOWAS has allayed the fears of possible security threats should the three countries finally exit the community, as it assures of fostering cordial relationship with them, especially in the area of trans-border security, to ensure stability in the region. From the banquet hall of the State House, Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
In the meantime, the three West African states ruled by military leaders have all announced visa-free travel and residency rights for citizens in the 15-member regional bloc ECOWAS ahead of their leaving the group next year. The leaders of the states, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, say the visa and residency decision had been taken in the spirit of friendship and to strengthen centuries-old ties among African people. The trio plans to withdraw from ECOWAS in January after refusing the bloc's demand to restore democratic rule. ECOWAS leaders did meet in Nigeria over the weekend and decided the date of January 29th, 2025. We're off on another break on The World Today. Still ahead. Divers dressed as Santa Claus taking a swim among sea animals, bringing Christmas cheer to as many as visit the aquarium in Seattle. Stay with us. Welcome back. Nigeria's elder statesman, Chief Emeka Anyaoku, and the British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Mr. Richard Montgomery, have been invested as patron and vice patron of the Nigeria-Britain Association. At the investiture event in Lagos, both men were recognized and honored for their years of diplomatic work in fostering bilateral relations between both countries. Our correspondent, Layo Olarinde, reports.
They have received several decorations.
Celebrating eminent diplomats with years of vast experience, this investiture honors two men doing great work in fostering bilateral relations between Nigeria and Britain,
including GCON.
The Nigeria-Britain Association put together this honorable ceremony to confer on Nigeria's elder statesman, Chief Emeka Anyaoku, as the patron of the NBA, and British High Commissioner Richard Montgomery, the vice patron of Nigeria-Britain Association.
I have been a member of Nigeria-Britain Association for many years. I was, for some years, vice patron under Akintola Williams. And it's a great honor to have been asked to succeed him. And I believe that the association is doing a very good job and has a very important job in the future, because relations between Nigeria and United Kingdom, not only on the level of government, but on the level of the people. And Britain-Nigeria Association operates at the level of the people.
And please put your hands together for both of them.
Next is the investiture of British High Commissioner to Nigeria, Richard Montgomery.
You as our vice patron.
Well, I'm really delighted and honoured to be invested as the vice patron of the Nigeria-Britain Association. And it's even more of an honour to be alongside Chief Emeka. You know, what a global statesman. Not just someone who's fostered ties between the UK and Nigeria, but also globally through the Commonwealth. This is a sort of association that builds our people-to-people links between our two countries, which is really the foundation. It's friends, families, businesses that have links between both our countries that really build the strength of the bond.
Relations between the two countries have held strong, with different partnerships and MOUs in place. The NBA president, Shola Oyetayo, speaks of the significance of these events to fostering bilateral relations between both countries.
It's a friendship for common good. Our relationship with Nigeria and Britain, if you look at where we started from, it started from Britain as British Nigerian Educational Trust, and now we're moving into Nigerian Britain Association. So we have relationship in terms of when you look at education, when you look at the culture, we look at opportunities and empowerment.
Governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, is represented by the Commissioner for Commerce, Cooperatives, Trade and Investment, Mrs. Folashade Ambrose Medebem.
By fostering relationships among individuals, organizations, and institutions, the NBA has bridged cultural divides and created platforms for collaboration in business, education, and social development. The association's work is a testament to the power of partnerships in driving progress and creating opportunities for mutual benefit.
Formed in 1969, Nigeria-Britain Association seeks to find friendship for a common good. Layo Olarinde, Channels Television News.
A surprise jolly guest dressed in red and white can be found swimming within the 120,000-gallon window on Washington Water's habitat at the Seattle Aquarium throughout the month of December. The aquarium's tradition of hosting a diving Santa has been going strong for 15 years now, after being inspired by other association of zoos and aquariums, institutions that have similar events each year. Santa swims among the fish, kelp, and other sea life that dwell in waters within the Puget Sound and Washington's coastal waters. Well, Santa Anderfeber is a research diver at the University of Washington who also volunteers her time at the aquarium, interacting with the public and educating them about the importance of environmental conservation.
It's such a fun thing to get to bring to folks. The aquarium is such a special place, and I love being able to be a part of that for so many members and visitors and families that come to join us. And yeah, it's great to be here and working with people. As much as they can see into the habitat, we can see out. So all the smiles and the waves and the excitement. We can't hear them, but I have learned how to read lips a little bit, and we get really excited and do some fun diver sign language. I love blowing bubble kisses at them and seeing all the excitement and the joy out there. It's really fun. So we've got a lot of rockfish in here, some salmon, some wolf eels, who are some of my favorites. We've got lingcod, greenlings, and of course my absolute favorite, which is kelp. It's not an animal, it's similar to a plant, and it is really, really important to all those local ecosystems. It adds a little bit of bulk. I mean, a dry suit is already pretty bulky, and then it adds just another layer of some extra stuff to be mindful of as a diver. But I've got lots of help. I've got lots of elves running around to help me get dressed. It goes on dry, and then it is sopping wet by the time it comes out. So we got to take care of it, because salt water is not an easy thing for a lot of fabrics. So we take extra special care of the Santa suits.
And over in Australia, homes in Sydney's southwest have drawn crowds and thrilled onlookers with dazzling Christmas light displays over the past week, bringing the Christmas and community spirit to the suburbs in the process. Along Swansonia Avenue in the Sydney suburb of Mount Annan, houses have been decorated with thousands of string lights and numerous Christmas-themed display pieces and inflatables, delighting onlookers who either drive or walk the length of the homes to get a better look and, of course, take pictures with friends and family. It is fun, isn't it? So once again, if you do see interesting Christmas lights or Christmas displays, don't forget to take a picture and send them to us. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.